There's a strange imbalance that shows up in a lot of unhappy relationships. Staying often feels difficult, exhausting, and draining, but still somehow easier than stepping back. Not better, just easier. Even when people can clearly see that something isn't working, creating distance can feel heavier than remaining inside a situation they already know is making them unhappy. That imbalance is what's worth paying attention to, because it's rarely about love alone, and it's rarely about not knowing that things are wrong. More often, it's about what staying allows people to avoid. At the beginning of most relationships, dissatisfaction is noticeable. There's contrast, a sense that something feels off compared to how things were supposed to feel, or how they once did. Early discomfort tends to be interpreted as a signal, something to talk about, something to resolve. But when that discomfort doesn't resolve quickly, the relationship doesn't usually end right away. It adjusts. Small compromises are made. Expectations are lowered slightly. Certain conversations are postponed. None of this feels dramatic in the moment. It feels practical. Over time, those adjustments start to accumulate. What once felt like a temporary rough patch becomes the new baseline. What once caused concern becomes familiar. What once prompted questions becomes something people work around. Staying begins to feel like the default, and defaults are powerful. Stepping back, on the other hand, introduces uncertainty. It raises questions that staying doesn't require answering. Questions like, what changes if this ends? What routines disappear? What identity shifts might follow? Even in unhappy relationships, there is often structure. There are shared habits, shared language, shared expectations. Those structures create a sense of continuity, even when satisfaction is low. Stepping away threatens that continuity, and the human mind tends to treat threats to stability as more urgent than ongoing discomfort, especially when that discomfort has become predictable. Predictable pain often feels more manageable than unpredictable change. That's part of why staying can feel easier, not because it's good, but because it's known. Another factor is how people reinterpret their own experience over time. As dissatisfaction becomes familiar, it's often reframed. What once felt unacceptable is reclassified as normal. What once felt concerning is described as just how relationships are. Memory adjusts to support endurance. Earlier expectations are softened in hindsight. Initial standards are quietly revised, not necessarily out of self-deception, but out of adaptation. People become skilled at explaining their own persistence. They emphasize patience. They highlight loyalty. They focus on the parts that still function. And all of that can be true, while the underlying unhappiness remains. Stepping back interrupts that narrative. It forces a reevaluation, not just of the relationship, but of the story built around staying. That can feel destabilizing. There's also the weight of invested time. The longer a relationship lasts, the more history it accumulates. Shared experiences, shared decisions, shared effort. That history can make stepping back feel like erasing something rather than changing something. Even when the present is unsatisfying, the past can exert a quiet pull, not because it guarantees a better future, but because it represents effort already spent. Staying allows that effort to feel justified. Stepping back raises uncomfortable questions about whether it was. Another reason stepping back feels harder is that unhappiness often arrives gradually. There's rarely a single moment that clearly signals an end. Instead, Dissatisfaction seeps in slowly. Moments of connection still exist. Functional routines still operate. The relationship still works in practical terms. That makes it difficult to point to a specific reason for leaving. Without a clear breaking point, stepping back can feel unjustified, even to the person experiencing the unhappiness. Staying, by contrast, doesn't require justification. It simply continues what's already happening, and continuation often feels less demanding than interruption. People also tend to underestimate how much their environment shapes their emotional baseline. When unhappiness becomes familiar, it loses its sharpness. It doesn't disappear, but it becomes quieter, less urgent, less distinct. Stepping back reintroduces contrast. It makes the unhappiness visible again by removing the routine that dulled it. That clarity can feel overwhelming, so people delay. They tell themselves they'll reassess later, that things might improve, that now isn't the right time. Each delay reinforces staying as the easier option, until staying no longer feels like a choice at all, just the situation they're in. From the inside, this doesn't usually feel like weakness or avoidance. It feels like endurance, like making the best of circumstances, like being realistic. And endurance is often socially rewarded. People praise patience more readily than clarity, stability more than change, commitment more than reassessment. Stepping back doesn't always receive the same validation, especially when the unhappiness isn't dramatic enough to be easily explained. All of this contributes to the imbalance. Staying feels easier not because it's lighter, but because it postpones disruption. Stepping back feels heavier, not because it's wrong, but because it concentrates uncertainty into a single moment. That difference in timing matters. Gradual discomfort can be absorbed. Sudden change cannot. So many people remain in relationships that quietly wear them down, not because they don't recognize the unhappiness, but because stepping back demands a kind of clarity that staying does not. And clarity, especially when it alters familiar structures, can feel like the hardest part.